It's Not What It Seems short story by JameliaAlicia. In a crowded room full of children wearing white martial arts gear, three children are walking towards the school of assassins. Their faces are pale, dark and gloomy, with few words to speak. A shadowed story gripped by past trauma as their parents guided them towards the building. The building is described as contemporary, blending ancient and Enlightenment styles of architecture. Roars were heard from doja as children practiced repetitive moves, using defense and block moves while holding a sword. One child named Nova, who was 7 years of age, who came from a poor family. She unexpectedly reached this school by escaping from an abusive household, after which the last hit from her father was a warning for her to leave. Nova had no idea about this building. The only thing she noticed was the children in the dojo dueling.
She breathed. Free.
She counted her steps and walked into the building. On the other side of the spectrum was a boy named Luca, who was 8 years old, who walked into the session and started to join in with the other children and practice Jujitsu. He smirked and looked across from him and noticed a new girl. Her name was Amelia, who walked past the class and went to the class next door. Amelia was a wild card as she came from an aristocratic background with dark origins. Amelia slowly walked in and tied coal black hair in a bun. She ran into the room and did a high kick, which sparked the attention of the karate instructor. The karate instructor said, "What is that in your hand?" "Pepper spray." "Smart girl. You are too young to have this, but you did well. This will be useful when you are older," said the female karate instructor. She crossed her arms, and as Amelia politely bowed. They had no idea what would await them on the other side. The music is too loud for most people to hear anything but the bass. For them, it's perfect, because they don't listen the way others do. The first thing Cade notices is breath. Not sight. Never sight anymore. Not since the training rooms where darkness was forced over their eyes and failure meant bruises that lasted for weeks. The blindfold presses against his skin now, damp with sweat, but he doesn't lift it. He doesn't need to. 3 heartbeats ahead of him. Too fast, panicked. One to his left, controlled, measured, waiting. Behind him, a shift of leather against fabric. A hand reaching. Cade moves first, his palm cutting through the air, stopping just short of the man's throat. Not striking, just marking. A warning.
A choice.
Across from him, Naira doesn't hesitate. Her kick lands clean and precise, exactly where the breath had stuttered seconds before. The man collapses, the sound swallowed by the music and the crowd's cheers, who think it's all part of the show. "It always looks like a show." "That's 2, she says quietly. "You're counting?" Cade replies. "I always count." On the other side of the floor, Sarah tilts her head slightly. A hiss. A sharp intake of breath. She moves toward it, slow at first, then faster, fluid, like memory taking over muscle. Her hand lifts, the small canister already angled. A burst. The man screams, stumbling back into a table, glasses shattering like brittle echoes of the past. For a moment, Sarah freezes, not because of the chaos, but because of the memory. It comes in flashes. A smaller room, quieter. Children lined up in black uniforms, blindfolds tied too tightly. "Find your opponent," the instructor had said. Sarah remembers standing still while the others rushed. She remembers listening, not for movement, but for fear. One child is breathing too hard. Another shifting of feet against wood. But one silent. She chose wrong. Pain followed. Again. As years went by, the children grew and evolved into what we will be known as young assassins. In between the corridors of each dojo were the 3 children training, now adults training. Blindfolded was a test of endurance and muscle memory. As they became nocturnal assassins, they learned the skill of being blindfolded and fighting with sight, which led them to leave the academy with no trace of their existence. Back in the club, her grip tightens. She doesn't choose wrong anymore. "They're adapting," Naira says, ducking under a wild swing she never sees but always anticipates. "They always do," Cade replies. Too late. A chair scrapes behind him. He pivots, catching the attacker's wrist mid-strike, twisting just enough to disarm without wasting energy. Efficiency, always efficiency. The crowd roars louder now, phones out, lights flashing. To them, it's spectacle, 3 performers blindfolded, moving like something unreal. They don't see the precision. They don't see the training. They don't see the truth. We leave in 30, Sarah says.
No, mira replies.
Cade stills. Naira rarely disagrees. One more, she says.
Why?
Cade asks. Naira turns her head slightly toward the upper level, toward the balcony where one figure hasn't moved, hasn't reacted, hasn't made a sound. Cade listens. Nothing.
No breath. No sift.
No heartbeat he can catch. And that is wrong. Found them, Naira whispers. A pause. Then Cade smiles just slightly. Finally. Above them, the figure leans forward into the neon light. And for the first time that night, the hunters realize they might not be the only ones who pass the test. Their existence may be forgotten to the world, but the Academy will always remember these 3 children. As assassins. The balcony figure does not move like the others. No restless shifting, no breath snagging on fear, no rhythm to read. Just stillness, deliberate, practiced stillness. Below, the music swells again, bass rippling through the floor, but Cade feels something cut clean through it. Absence. It presses against his senses like a void. Careful, Sarah murmurs, her voice low and steady. That's not normal. Naira steps forward anyway, one measured step at a time, her body loose, ready. Nothing about this place is, she replies. But there's a tension in her shoulders now, a fraction tighter than before. Cade angles his head upward. They want us to come to them, he says. So we don't. The crowd shifts, drawn by the unfinished violence, unaware of the shift in the room. A man stumbles between them, drunk, laughing, reaching out as if to touch Naira's arm. She moves without thinking, 2 fingers to his wrist, a turn, a redirect, and he collapses harmlessly into a chair. Not a threat. Not worth the effort. But the balcony's still wrong. Then we draw them down, Sarah says. Naira smiles faintly. Now you're thinking. She moves first this time, not toward the stairs, but toward the center of the floor. Her foot drags just slightly, deliberate, loud enough for the trained ear. A mistake if you didn't know her. An invitation if you did. Silence answers. For a second, nothing happens. Then, a shift. Not from above. From within. Cade's body reacts before thought catches up. He turns sharply, hands slicing through the air, and meets resistance. A block. Fast. Precise. His wrist is caught mid-motion, held just long enough to register skill before being released. Someone is already among them. Too slow, a voice says, close, calm, almost amused. Naira pivots, her kick cutting toward the sound, but it meets nothing.
Air.
The presence has already moved.
Sera inhale sharply.
3 no 1. She corrects herself. It's just 1. 1 is enough, Cade replies. The figure moves again, and this time Naira feels it. A brush of air against her shoulder, a whisper of movement that shouldn't be there. She counters instantly, elbow driving back, but it's anticipated. Redirected. They're not chasing anymore. They're being read. Blindfolds, the voice says. They taught you well, but they taught you to listen to what's there. A pause. What happens when there's nothing to hear? Sarah's fingers tighten around the canister, but she doesn't fire. Not yet. She's thinking, listening past the obvious, past breath and movement, reaching for something deeper. Memory. The quiet child. The one who made no sound. The one she chose wrong. Her head tilts slightly. There's always something, she says. And then she moves, not toward the last sound, not toward movement, but toward space. Toward where the presence isn't. A gamble. For the first time, contact lands clean. A sharp exhale, not loud, but real. Naira is already there, closing the distance, her strike following Sarah's instinct without hesitation. Cade joins a fraction behind, their movements aligning without sight, without signal. Only trust, only training. The figure breaks away, but slower this time. Not invisible, not untouchable, just better. Good. The voice says again, though there's less amusement now. You learned. Cade straightened slightly, resetting his stance. So did you. Above them, the balcony is empty. The test has not ended. It was beginning, and the academy was giving them more hurdles and challenges to overcome. Cade remembered a voice in his head saying, "Who says this will be easy?" He remembered this statement mentioned by one of his martial arts instructors when he first stepped into the academy. Something about this statement rang a bell of curiosity and wonder. This means only one thing. 21 years ago, rain hammered against the windows of the academy like fists trying to get in. Inside, the children stood in perfect lines across the cold training hall, black uniforms hanging from bodies too small for the discipline forced into them. No one spoke unless spoken to. No one looked up. The only sound was the slow dripping of water from coats left near the entrance and the steady footsteps of Instructor Vale pacing across the floor. Cade was the youngest in the room. 7 years old.
Too thin. Too quiet.
Vale stopped in front of him and crouched slightly, studying the bruise darkening the side of the boy's face from yesterday's lesson. "Why did you lose?" he asked calmly. Cade kept his eyes forward. "I listened to movement. And there wasn't any." Vale's expression didn't change. Exactly. Across the room, Naira stood rigid despite blood drying beneath her nose. She refused to wipe it away. The older children used to whisper that she enjoyed the punishments, but the truth was simpler. Naira hated showing weakness more than she hated pain. She learned to find reasons to show strength in the face of obstacles. Sarah stood beside her, smaller than the others, her hands clenched behind her back. She watched everything. Every blink. Every breath. Every twitch of fear in the room. Even then, before the years hardened her, she already understood people too well. Instructor Vale walked toward the center of the hall and placed a wooden chair beneath the hanging lights.
"One of you passes today," he announced.
A murmur almost moved through the room before dying instantly. The instructors along the walls remained motionless, their faces hidden in shadow. Vale continued. The rest began again. A man dressed entirely in black entered silently and sat in the chair. The children watched him carefully, trying to memorize details before the blindfolds came down.
Tall.
Broad shoulders. Hands resting calmly on his knees. Breathing slowly. Too slow. Cade noticed that immediately. "Blindfolds on," Vale ordered. Fabric tightened across their eyes. Darkness swallowed the room. "Find the target." At first, the children rushed. Feet scraped wood. Someone collided with another student. A loud mistake earned a sharp strike from an instructor somewhere in the dark, followed by a cry quickly silenced. Naira moved carefully, measuring the room step by step. Sarah stayed still, listening harder than the others, her breathing shallow. Cade did neither. He listened once.
Twice.
Then frowned. The breathing in the chair was wrong. Too controlled. Too deliberate. A distraction. Slowly, he turned his head toward the far left corner of the room where rain tapped lightly against the windows. Nothing. But not empty. The smallest shift disturbed the air. Someone standing still. Watching. Cade walked toward it. Behind him, Vale's voice echoed through the hall. "Too slow, children. A real opponent would already have killed you." One student grabbed the seated man in the chair triumphantly. Instantly, they screamed. Not the target. The room fell silent again. Cade stopped inches away from the corner. He could feel it now, not sound, not breath exactly, but presence. The strange pressure of another body sharing space. He reached forward carefully and touched fabric. For the first time that day, the room reacted. Several instructors straightened. Naira turned sharply beneath her blindfold. Sarah's eyes widened beneath hers. Cade had found him. The real target. A hand gripped Cade's wrist tightly, but not violently. "Well done," a voice said quietly from the darkness. Older.
Calm.
Dangerous. Cade froze as the blindfold was removed from his eyes. Standing before him was a man none of the children had ever seen enter the room. Dressed in black gloves and a dark coat, he seemed to absorb the light itself. His face carried no pride, no warmth, Only curiosity. Instructor Vale lowered his head slightly toward the stranger. That frightened the children more than anything else. The stranger looked directly at Cade. What told you I was there? Cade hesitated. The chair breathed too perfectly. For the first time, the man smiled. A small smile, but real. And what does that mean? Cade looked at the false target still sitting calmly in the chair. It means, he said slowly, the obvious thing is usually the trap. The stranger released his wrist. Good, he replied. Then his expression disappeared again. Keep that lesson alive, he said. It may be the only reason you survive adulthood, as adulthood is only the beginning of your assassin duty.